All right, let's dive into this story circle thing. All of your sources have got me super curious about Dan Harmon's framework.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how such a simple concept can unlock so much about what makes a story really work.
Right. I mean, we've got everything here, Reddit threads, YouTube videos breaking stuff down, in-depth articles. Looks like everyone's got an opinion on this.
Well, that's part of the fun. It's a concept that can be applied to pretty much any story, so there's a lot to unpack.
So for those just tuning in, what exactly is this story circle? What makes it so special?
Think of it like a roadmap for a story, like taking that classic hero's journey and distilling it into 8 clear steps. It's almost like a cheat sheet for crafting a narrative that truly resonates.
Okay, I'm listening. 8 steps to storytelling success, huh? But is this just for like epic fantasy novels or something?
Oh, not at all. That's the beauty of it. It's super versatile. We see it in everything from Pixar movies to sitcoms to even those crazy stories your friend tells at a party. Seriously.
Okay, I'm starting to see it. So one of the YouTube videos we got actually breaks down Pixar's Soul using the story circle. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. Soul's a perfect example of how it works in a story that's both, heartwarming and also makes you think.
All right, so let's break it down. So are you the protagonist? That's Joe Gardner, right?
Yeah.
The music teacher who dreams of being a jazz musician.
Exactly. And his need is to finally achieve that dream, which he gets the chance to do when he's invited to play with a famous musician. But then, boom, he falls down that manhole. Talk about a bad day, right?
Yeah, that's gotta hurt. So that's his go, the event that throws him into the unknown. And in this case, the unknown is the afterlife.
You got it. He ends up in this place called the Great Before, where souls develop their personalities before being born. Pretty wild, right?
Wow, things just got existential. So now he has to figure out how to get back to his body so he can live his dream.
Exactly. That's his search. He's trying to find his way back to Earth, and along the way, he meets this cynical soul named 22.
So he's got to adapt to this new reality, right? Learning the rules of the afterlife, figuring out how to even function in this new form.
Right. And eventually, he does find a way back to Earth, but as we know the story circle, there's always a price to pay.
Yeah, every victory has its cost. That's the catch for Joe. I mean, he already died once.
That's where Soul gets interesting. The price isn't physical, it's more of an emotional one. Joe realizes that being obsessed with his dream made him miss the beauty of just living.
So the return isn't just about going back to his body.
Right. He returns to his life, but now he sees it with new eyes. The real prize is his newfound appreciation for the simple things.
Wow, that is a powerful message. So even though he physically returns, he's not the same Joe anymore. He's been changed by the experience.
You nailed it. And that change is the core of the story circle. It's what makes the journey meaningful, both for the character and for us watching. Makes you think, doesn't it?
Definitely makes you think. Like, what would I learn if I had a near-death experience? Okay, so we've seen how this works with, a heartwarming Pixar movie. But what about something totally bonkers like Rick and Morty? Can the story circle handle that kind of chaos?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think Rick and Morty's ability to be both completely absurd and surprisingly deep is proof that this framework works.
Okay, challenge accepted. Let's level up then. We have a breakdown of the episode, Morty Night Run, and let me warn you, things get pretty meta, even for Rick and Morty.
Oh, yeah. This one's a great example of how the story circle can handle darker, more complex themes.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't seen it, Rick takes Morty on a trip to a space pawn shop. Sounds innocent enough, right? But it turns out Rick is selling weapons to an assassin.
And that's where Morty's need comes in. He's horrified by what Rick is doing and decides to do something about it, even if it means going against his grandpa.
As much as Morty gets dragged into these crazy situations, he's got a strong moral compass, which often bumps heads with Rick's looser morals.
Right. So Morty decides to go on this mission to save the assassin's target. And who is this target? A giant gas cloud named Fart. Only in Rick and Morty, right?
Oh man, I knew it was going to get weird. So now Morty's searching for a way to save this gas cloud, adapting to every ridiculous situation that pops up.
And he does manage to save Fart. But of course, there's always a price to pay.
Right, always a catch.
Yeah.
What could possibly go wrong with saving a giant gas cloud?
Well, it turns out Fart isn't as friendly as Morty thought. He's actually planning to destroy all carbon-based life forms, like humans.
Uh-oh, Morty's good intentions backfired. So he returns to the situation, but he's changed. Not only did he fail to save the day, he might have doomed the entire universe.
Exactly. And this is where you really see Morty's change. He's forced to make a difficult choice, kill Fart, this being he just risked everything to save, or let him destroy all life. It's a pretty heavy decision for a cartoon character to make, right?
Yeah, definitely not your average Saturday morning cartoon. But it just shows how the story circle can explore those complex themes, even in a show like this.
It's not just about the crazy adventures, right? It's about those emotional and moral struggles. And that's what makes it so captivating.
It's funny, we started with this heartwarming Pixar movie, and now we're talking about a show with, like, a talking pickle and a giant killer gas cloud. And somehow, they both fit into this story circle framework.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so fascinating. It shows that there are these fundamental storytelling patterns that go beyond genre or tone. It doesn't matter how wild the story is. The ones that really stick with us are usually tapping into these universal human experiences.
So we've seen how it plays out in a couple of fictional examples. But what about when you're actually trying to write a story? I mean, we've got these articles here about how writers use the story circle in their process.
Yeah, this is where it becomes less of a blueprint and more of a brainstorming tool, right? It's not about following strict rules. It's more about understanding the underlying principles and applying them to your own ideas.
So it's less about paint by numbers and more about knowing the building blocks of a good story.
Exactly. It can help you come up with ideas, outline your plot, even get to know your characters better, and troubleshoot issues.
I'm really curious to hear more about how writers use this in practice. I guess we'll dive into that in part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds good. We'll be back soon to explore Dan Harmon's story circle even further and uncover more of its hidden depths.
All right, welcome back to our story circle deep dive. After that last part, I'm starting to see my own life as one of those movie montages.
It's funny how that happens. Once you start noticing these storytelling patterns, they're everywhere. That's what makes this framework so cool.
Totally. We talked about movies, TV shows, even Rick and Morty.
Yeah.
And last time we were even talking about those big life-changing decisions, like when I quit my job to travel the world.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was a classic story circle moment for sure. But, there are also those smaller moments, the little turning points, that can be just as powerful, right?
Right. Like those times you have to make a tough decision or face a fear. They may not seem like a big deal at the time, but looking back, you realize something shifted.
Exactly. And one of those articles you sent actually talks about how writers use the story circle to explore those subtle shifts in characters. They might not be fighting dragons, but their internal journey is just as important.
Yeah, one of the examples they use is from the show Fleabag. The main character is dealing with everyday life stuff, but it's just as gripping as any action movie.
Fleabag is a great example of how the story circle can bring those everyday complexities to life, those small choices and moments of self-discovery we all go through.
So if we're trying to apply this to our own lives, does that mean we have to chart out every decision on a story circle spreadsheet or something?
No, not at all. Remember, the story circle is just a tool, a way to look at things. It's not about rigidly following a formula. It's more about understanding the bigger picture.
Okay, that makes sense. It's more about getting to the why behind our choices. What's driving us? What are our needs? How are we changing?
Exactly. And those changes aren't always good, are they? Sometimes we make mistakes, we experience loss, things happen that make us feel lost.
True. Life isn't a fairy tale, right? But even those tough experiences, if we learn from them, they can make us stronger. Like that saying, what doesn't kill you?
Makes you stronger. Yeah, it's a cliche, but it's true. And the story circle helps us see that growth, even in those hard times. It's like when you have to adapt to something difficult, that's when you really change.
Thinking about some of the tough stuff I've been through, yeah, I can see that. Those are the times I really figured out what's important, what I can handle.
It's like those experiences refine us. They show us who we really are.
I'm starting to think of the story circle as less of a storytelling device and more like, a philosophy almost.
Yeah.
Like a way of understanding how we grow from our experiences.
I like that. It's about realizing we're all on our own journeys, and even though those journeys are unique, there are these common threads that connect us. We're all seeking, struggling, overcoming,
And it's not just individual growth, right?
Yeah.
Like we were talking about before, those personal stories can have a ripple effect.
Exactly. Think about all those people who changed the world, the activists, artists, inventors. Their stories usually start with some personal need, some vision for something better.
And they're willing to risk everything to make it happen.
And by doing that, they inspire others to join them. It creates a movement, a change that goes way beyond just one person.
It's like a chain reaction of inspiration, right? Like even a small act of courage can make a difference.
Absolutely. And that's what makes these stories so powerful. It shows that we all have the potential to create change.
You know, one of the articles you shared mentioned how the story circle even applies to like news stories and biographies. Is it really that universal?
Well, think about the news stories that really stick with you. They often follow a similar structure, right?
Okay, I think I see it. Like a town that's been devastated by a natural disaster. That's their you, right?
Yeah.
The town and its people.
Right. And their need becomes something basic, like survival, rebuilding their lives.
They're forced to go through this horrible experience, deal with the loss, the trauma.
And then the search begins for shelter, resources, missing loved ones. And in the process, they're forced to adapt to this new reality. Everything has changed.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But I see the pattern. So they eventually find what they need to rebuild, but I mean, what's the price?
It can be a heavy one, right? The loss of loved ones, homes, that sense of security, it's a steep price to pay.
But then they return. They start to rebuild both physically and emotionally. And even though they're back home, they've been changed by the experience.
Exactly. And that change is what makes their stories so compelling. It's not just about the disaster, it's about resilience, the human spirit's ability to overcome adversity.
It's like those real-life stories hit us in the same way as those fictional ones.
That's because the story circle reveals something universal, whether it's in a galaxy far, far away or in our own backyard.
Okay, so news stories, check. But what about biographies? How does the story circle work there?
Think about the biographies that really grab you. They're usually stories of people who overcame huge obstacles, who achieved amazing things, who changed the world, right?
Yeah, like Martin Luther King Jr. or Marie Curie or Nelson Mandela, people who fought for something bigger than themselves.
Right. Their need might be justice or knowledge or freedom, whatever it is, it drives them to go on these incredible journeys.
Those journeys are rarely easy. They're going to face opposition, setbacks, maybe even be imprisoned or threatened. Right.
Absolutely. It's a constant search for solutions, for allies, for the strength to keep going. They have to adapt to changing circumstances, betrayals, all kinds of challenges.
But when they do find what they're looking for, it's a huge victory.
And it comes at a price. They might lose their freedom, their health, relationships. Sometimes they even lose their lives.
But they return changed. They leave their mark on the world.
And their change becomes part of history. It influences events and inspires people for generations.
Wow, so like their personal story circle ends up having this huge impact on the world.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. But those stories resonate because they speak to something fundamental about us, our desire for purpose, for connection, for something bigger than ourselves.
Okay, so from movies to news stories to the lives of incredible people, the story circle is everywhere.
And it gets even more fascinating when you apply it to those pivotal moments in your own life, those moments that shape who you are.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive. You know, after that last part, I'm starting to see my entire life as like a movie montage. It's crazy how this story circle is everywhere.
Yeah, right. It's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. But that's what makes this whole framework so insightful. It's not just about the stories we watch or read. It's about how we understand ourselves, you know?
We talked about movies, TV shows, even biographies. And we connected it to those like huge life-changing moments like when I decided to quit my job and travel the world. Right?
Oh, yeah, that was a great example. Your own personal story circle.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are also those smaller moments, those turning points, those decisions. That might not seem like a big deal at the time, but looking back, you realize, whoa, that actually changed things.
You know what I mean? Like that time you finally stood up to a bully or took a chance on something that scared you, those moments might not be blockbuster material, but they still shape who we are.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the articles you sent talks about how writers use the story circle to explore those subtle shifts in characters. They might not be saving the world, but they're still going through these internal transformations that make the story so interesting.
Yeah, one of the examples they used was Fleabag. She's just dealing with regular life stuff, but it's just as captivating as any action movie.
Exactly. Fleabag is a great example of how you can use the story circle to make those everyday struggles and triumphs just as compelling as, you know, fighting a dragon or something.
So, okay, if we're trying to apply this to our own lives, Do we have to pull out a story circle chart every time we make a decision?
No, not at all. Remember, it's a tool, a framework, a way of looking at things, not a set of rules. It's about understanding the patterns, the underlying forces that drive our actions and choices.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's less about, checking boxes and more about understanding what's really going on beneath the surface. Like, what are our needs? What are we seeking? How are we changing?
Exactly. And those changes, well, they're not always positive, right? Sometimes the price we pay is pretty steep. Sometimes we make mistakes. We experience loss. We hit roadblocks that make us question everything.
Life can be rough sometimes, right? It's not all sunshine and rainbows. But those tough experiences, if we can learn from them, I think they make us stronger. It's like that saying, what doesn't kill you?
It makes you stronger, right? It's cheesy, but there's definitely some truth to it. And the story circle, it helps us see how we grow from those experiences, even the painful ones. Like when you have to adapt to a tough situation, that's when you really figure out what you're made of.
When I think about some of the hardest times in my own life, yeah, I could see that. That's when I learned the most about myself, about what's important, about what I'm capable of.
It's like those experiences, they refine us. They show us who we really are.
You know what? I'm starting to see the story circle not so much as a storytelling tool, but more like, a way of life almost. A way of understanding how we grow and evolve through everything we experience.
I love that. And it's about recognizing that we're all on these journeys. And even though everyone's path is different, there are these common themes, these shared experiences that connect us all. We're all seeking, struggling, overcoming, transforming.
And it's not just individual growth, right? Like we were saying before, those personal stories, those individual journeys, they can have a ripple effect, a wider impact.
Absolutely. Think about those people who change the world. They often start with a personal need, a vision for something better, and they're willing to risk everything for it.
And by doing that, they inspire others. It creates a movement that goes beyond just one person's story.
It's like each person's story circle can spark another and another until you have this wave of change, this collective movement towards something bigger.
That's pretty powerful stuff. I think our deep dive into the story circle has been a huge success.
I agree. We've gone from movie plots to real-life turning points to understanding the patterns of human experience. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. I'm definitely feeling inspired to, pay attention to the story circles happening all around me and maybe even try shaping a few of my own.
And that's the amazing thing. The more you understand the power of storytelling, the more you realize we're all storytellers in our own way. We all have a story to tell, and those stories have the power to connect us, inspire us, and even change the world.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of Dan Harmon's Story Circle. We hope you've enjoyed the deep dive and keep those story ideas flowing.